Gentleman yields back. I now recognize Representative Andy Levin of Michigan, who's the Vice Chair of the Subcommittee on Asia, the Pacific, Central Asia, and Nonproliferation, for 5 minutes.
Thanks, Mr. Chairman, and thank you, Mr. Secretary, for helping the President end our longest ever war, which was the right thing to do, for your department's efforts to airlift out so many tens of thousands of Americans and Afghans when the Afghan government and armed forces fell so precipitously, and for your patience and steadfastness here today. Obviously, you've heard a lot about our concerns today regarding Afghans seeking refuge in the United States and elsewhere, and I want to start there. What commitments has the administration secured from third countries to host Afghans for a sufficient duration to allow the administration to process their SIV, P1, and P2 visas or humanitarian parole requests? Where are we at with that?
So we've secured a number of agreements that would allow us to, as Afghans come out of the country, and these would be SIV applicants, these would be potential refugees, with several countries where they could go to those countries. We could engage in the processing, especially with regard to SIVs, as you know, with a 14-step process. Very hard to complete that. There are parts that we could not possibly complete remotely in Afghanistan. So we do need to get them to third countries where we can complete that. And we have agreements in place.
I mean,
agreements in place with several countries.
I guess that's the question. Or do we
I'm
need
sorry?
more? Is the capacity enough, or do we need more? I guess.
I think the current capacity is enough, but that's something we're going to look very carefully at. And of course, much depends on the ongoing ability of people to leave Afghanistan and to get to these countries.
Okay. All right. Well, let's stay on the topic of Afghans who need protection right now. U.S. officials stated our commitment to Afghans at risk, such as civil society workers, human rights defenders, women's rights activists, journalists, and others, and that commitment didn't end with the withdrawal of U.S. personnel. Deciding where to draw these lines is super difficult. Who else specifically is the Biden administration defining as at risk, and how does the State Department intend to support them?
Yeah, you're right. It is very challenging. In the summer, we put in place, besides the SIV program, we put in place the so-called P2 category for people, for Afghans who didn't meet the requirements of the SIV program, but who had nonetheless worked, for example, for NGOs, for American news organizations, other institutions, but not directly for the U.S. government, so that they could qualify for the SIV. Of course, the general refugee program is available to people. So if they can get out of Afghanistan, which is obviously not, which is what we're working on, they can go to a third country and apply for refugee status. But we're particularly focused on Afghans at risk, and the ones most at risk are people who, by what they've done or what they've said or who they are, could be at real threat from the new government.
All right. Finally, let me return to the question of the drone strike, the U.S. drone strike in Kabul on August 29th, which reportedly killed at least 10 civilians, including 7 kids, just going from media reports. What I want to ask is, what role is the State Department playing in helping to investigate any civilian harm caused in this strike? Does the State Department have a role in this, or is it purely military or intelligence officials?
Well, without going into too much detail here, in the first instance, the military and intelligence is focused on reviewing everything that we did, as they do that as a matter of course, and of course they're doing that in this instance. To the extent that we have any information that comes to us that's relevant to this, of course we would feed it into that review process.
All right. Well, I hope we can take this up when we have a classified discussion, because, you know, it's just, it happens a lot, and we have to do everything we can to stop it. With that, Mr. Chairman, thank you so much, and I yield back.
Gentleman yields back. I now recognize Representative Claudia Tenney of New York, who's the vice-ranking member for the Subcommittee on International